Today we're going to take this Model A fuel pump, which fits a 28-29 Buick, and we're going to make it like new again. It's in pretty sad shape. There's a lot of things going on here. We have some bent castings. These Model A pumps, not Model A Ford, but it's the design of the pump. They use nut and bolts, screws with nuts on them to hold everything together, and they usually end up getting destroyed right in here. These two parts hold down, and this ends up bowing out. And if you're lucky enough to get one of these that isn't all cracked, which this one here is in really good shape. You got a good rebuildable pump. So we're going to get started by taking one of these, and you obviously can't clamp it into the vise anywhere because everything's going to hit everything. So I made a jig to put them on. It helps with assembling and taking it apart. Kind of overkill on the thickness of this thing, but it works. Anyway, you're going to tighten these two up so that it'll hold it in here nice and secure, and I'll show you why in a second. Once all this thing is secured to the jig, to hold it, you can do just about everything. Disassemble everything with it mounted to this plate. I want to get rid of these two fittings. Because you never know what lurks behind them. And I'm real happy to see no sealant on these. If you have to use any sealant, like if the fitting gets buried down inside, don't use Teflon tape. Use a Teflon paste if you have to put anything on it. Now this side, by the looks of it, they did use the paste on this particular side. You're using the Teflon tape. A lot of times, you'll run a bunch of things around there, and you won't see it, but one piece will get caught in there. And as you're running this in, or this way, running this in, it kind of shreds it, and it ends up getting stuck in these valves, and then your pump doesn't work. We want to mark the location and the relationship of the top casting to the body. Scribe somewhere. I saw a marker in here somewhere. I think it was on the other side, where obviously this has been rebuilt in the past. And they marked it. Let's see if I can see it. Right here. See the mark on the top and on the bottom? They marked it across. That way the top casting goes right back on the exact same way that it came off. Remove these two nuts. We want to remove the bowl first. Be careful. Make sure there's no cracks in it or chips. unhook the bail out of there. Be careful of this little cup as it'll fall off. And there's usually a gasket that's stuck in there. We'll get that off after this. Remove the nut. If it starts coming out of there real hard, change the position of the wrench. Because you don't want to be pushing this, you end up breaking something. And there's a fiber washer underneath. There's also a spring that they've stretched out. They're not supposed to be that long. Remove the dome. Another fiber washer. Another spring. Trust me, it's not supposed to be that long. And there's two valves down in here. But we're not that far yet. We got to get to the top. We got to remove all these 6 screws and the nuts. Most of the time they're at 3/8. You want to save these particular ones unless you request new screws, washers, and the nuts. We do have them. When I rebuild them, I replace everything. I replace the nuts, the washers, and the screws, along with a lot of other things, but those in particular. Let's get all these undone and we'll be able to take this casting off. Now, more times than not, see how this has been around for a number of years. This top casting will be stuck. Get a putty knife, put it in between the two pieces, and very gently tap it apart. It'll come out. Inside of here is those valves I was talking about. And you knock them out. That's what they look like. You're not going to use them again. Here's the gasket and the screen. Make sure you get all of that out of there. Nice and hard. See all this? This is all the remnants of fuel additives. Octane booster, lead substitute. It turns to mud. Car doesn't get used for a while and it sits. The fuel will dry up, but the additives will stay there. Your diaphragm, want to remove that nut in the center. Hold your fingers down on it. Hold the fingers down on the plate. There's a spring underneath here. And it's trying to drive everything up. Like that. Two plates, an inner and an outer. You have to look real careful as there's two sides to this plate. It's got an edge on it, and this side is rounded. That's the side that the diaphragm is going to ride on. You don't want it this way because it'll cut into the diaphragm. Just be careful that when you go to put it back together that goes going the right way. Spring. Also a copper washer, and in my opinion that's a little bit too thin. which we're going to replace it anyway. Turn it over. Remove these 4 screws. There's a spring and a cup underneath this also. Wrong screws in here. It should have been that long, the one that's down on the floor. Now, I'm going to trust that that's not going to pop off while I pick up that other screw. I'll show you. Thank God for magnets. That's the screw that's supposed to be in it. Actually, this is it was a long one that they cut down, but I'll show you the ones that are going to go in as opposed to what I just took out. This is one of the new screws, the black one. As you can see, there's a little bit of difference in the length. It's for a reason. Anyway, take this cover off. Be careful. I'm going to get to a spot where I can get underneath it. And it's got the wrong spring up there too, which is why it didn't pop off. This this spring belongs in a different style pump. The spring is usually the same size as that cup, not this small one. Again, I'll show you when the time comes. The difference in the springs. Okay, this is if you have to remove the arm, be very careful and knock that pin out through the other side, or this way and go out that way, and that'll remove the arm and the linkage. My suggestion is, if there's no problem with it, don't touch it. You gotta hope that in the 80 or 90 years that this has been around, that no wear has occurred in the pins, which it usually does. So what I'll do is I'll drive it out and give you and show you what's involved. These links are really confusing. You get a punch. It's about the same size as the pin. Be very careful doing this. If the casting is peened over on the other side, see, they put a sealer on this anyway. If the casting is peened over on the other side, or it's closed in, as you're driving this out, you're going to break the casting. Not a good thing. Okay, now we can take this out of here once the pin is out. This is the only thing you can't do while it's in this jig, is get the arm out, because it's blocked. Now the arm's going to slide right out through here. Give you an idea of what everything looks like in there. A lot of these Model A pumps, they've got a date code stamped on here when it came out of the mold. This one I think is September of 1928. So it's only been around for 98 years. 97. Now this is what you're looking at. Be careful if you're doing these pins. Oh, look, good thing I took it apart. There's a clip missing. If you're doing these pins, do them one at a time. Take that out, put the new one in. Same thing with all the rest of these. They're real easy to get mixed up. And the wear in these things is usually in here. I'm going to replace them all anyway. And it's okay because this only goes on there one way. But these, if you get these mixed up, there's all the individual plates. You better have taken a picture of it before you took it apart. So we're going to get everything cleaned up and ready to go. Then we're going to clear coat it, flatten out all the surfaces, and we'll go for some reassembly. Now that everything's cleaned up, what I wanted to show you was, and this is very common in anything with a glass bowl. It's kind of hard to tell, but the bail goes on these 2 points, and over time the pump will stop pumping. It'll stop pulling gas, and it's usually around this bowl. As it gets squished, people keep cranking that wing nut down and tightening this up, and all that does is just pulls these 2 sides down, only because it can't move this part because there's so much casting in the here and here. Over here and over here it's nice and light, and it tends to cup. As you can see, the bowl rocks. It would probably be alright because the gasket that goes in there is pretty thick, and it will take up any of the irregularities in there. But over time it's going to keep going. What I do with these is, when I get these, is I made a spacer that'll fit right in here, and see how it rocks still. And I put this down on a plate, a flat plate, and clamp it right in the center and underneath. Give it a little bit of pressure and just heat up this area with a propane torch. You gotta go real easy if you have to do it. Just get it all nice and warmed up, give a little pressure to it, let it sit for a while, then go back, hit it a little bit more, give it a little bit more, tighten. You'll eventually get it to, it'll take all this rocking out of it, and the bowl will be back to sealing once again. I'll show you how we end up after I do the heating up. If you're going to do this, be careful with the pressure you put on here, because you can break that casting. I just started off nice and easy. A little bit of pressure and let it sit. Do that 2 or 3 times, maybe more, whatever it takes. Just keep heating it, clamping it, heating it, and clamping it. You'll get it flat. It's well worth it. Now, while that's heating and cooling and heating and cooling, sorry about that, we're going to put the arm back in. We're going to find the side that the pin will slide in, and I don't like that. Okay, I got a different pin. Now here comes the kind of a difficult. You have to snake all this in here, down through the hole, and slide the pin through. And as long as you got everything the way it's supposed to go, now we want to dimple this casting. See those 3 marks? That's what we want to do with this. And it holds that. It'll hold that casting, the pin in. Use a little center punch, and just give it just enough of a tap. That'll hold that hold that pin from sliding out. If you're doing this, make sure you support it. And it's stuck in there. It ain't going anywhere. Now the easiest thing to do would be to put this back in the jig, and that's just what I'm going to do as soon as I find it. As putting all this back together will be easier with it mounted in here. That way it can't go anywhere, and you don't have to get to the pin anymore. The arm. Of course I can't get this up anymore, but I have access to the bottom, and I can pull it up. Now on these particular pumps, it's easier to put this in first, and it'll hold the pull rod from dropping down. Now remember I told you about the spring? This is what belongs in there. This is what came out. Wrong diameter, wrong tension, wrong size wire. It just happened to be something that they had. Plus it fits the cup like it's supposed to. And we want to take this cover that I flattened the surfaces out on, and I didn't get the screws out. Get a couple of the screws cut. You might want to tip this down a little bit, make it easier going in there. Take the cover and notice this spring. I can get my fingers out of the way. The spring is sitting closer to here than it is here, and you'll notice the cover is offset too. Set it in there, get them caught. Tighten them up. Now some of these covers only have 2 screws, some of them have 4. This is one of the original ones with the 4 screws. Evidently they felt that it was better to have 4 with this stamped steel cover than it was with just 2. You end up with leaks over in there. Then they made this cover out of better material, thicker material, and only went down to 2. Now that we got that in, it can't push down. We take the spring, small cup that fits that, the diaphragm, push everything down. Remember there's 2 sides to this. Put the hexagonal washer on, the lock washer, and then run the nut down. This would be a good time to line up the holes in the diaphragm with the holes in the casting. Hang on to that diaphragm so it doesn't spin. And then tighten it up. It's time to heat up that casting again, give it another little tighten. And the doesn't move a bit. Nice and flat now. Got to resurface this. I just stick a piece of sandpaper on an old glass bowl. Run it around a few times. Hit these 2 surfaces and make sure they're nice and flat. You can do the same thing with a flat file. Now we have to get down inside of here. Make sure that these 2 valve seat areas are nice and flat. And that worked. Now, to install the valves, it's going to be easier if I take this out of here. You get new valves, drop them in, make sure they're sitting down flat. Remember that other brass spring that was this long? That's the right one. Fiber washer. Make sure the spring goes up inside of this there's a seat there that it can't go all the way in. And snug it down. Put the other valve in. Make sure it's sitting flat. Drop the spring in. Again, washer, and that's where the spring sits, up inside of there. And tighten it down. Now I think there's enough room for the bowl to sit on there, but in order for me to get the nut caught on this inside, I'm going to have to come in through here, and the bowl will be in the way. Otherwise, you put the bowl on now, get it all set. Now we can go back to this, and another one of my little tricks. I have to push this arm to pull the diaphragm down inside, so that down inside of here, so that I can preload it. Well, I can't get to the arm, so I have this this bolt that's just, the hole is strategically placed to hit the arm and pull it down inside like that. Perfect. Now that that diaphragm is all preloaded, I can put the screws in. This is where you'd probably reuse your old ones, unless you ordered new screws with it too. Put the washer on, put the nut on, and just get it cut. Doesn't have to go down all the way. You don't want to tighten it up just yet anyway. And push it through, washer and the nut. This is probably the only style pump that uses a nut and a washer. If you have a different type of pump, and you say, yeah, but mine has there's one screw that has a nut on the bottom of it. It's because the threads get stripped out in the casting. Normally there'd be threads in the casting. And this is the one that makes it a little difficult to get when the bowl's in the way. But if you've got little fingers, you can do it. Now this one here, easiest to do is to turn it sideways. Put the washer on, put the nut in there. And get it cut. At this point you can tighten everything down because with the diaphragms all preloaded. Get your 3/8 inch do it in a crisscross. And just make sure that they're all, make sure you didn't miss any. Okay, back up. Now you can put your bowl on. Easiest to put the bail on first. Watch this area in here for any chips or cracks or any lines or anything. Now you can release this piece. It's usually a little difficult because it's got pressure against it. And don't be late for the train. I suppose I could put a wing nut on this to make it a little easier. Now, in order to test it, I take this, put it in through that same hole. Got one that's a little smaller, and I can test it that way, make sure it works. Now I've discovered that this isn't really this cover didn't really come with this pump, with this body. Here's another one from a 29. It's supposed to be like this. As you can see, these are both the same. This one comes out here, this goes out here. What they did is put a 90-degree fitting on it so that it would do that. The top is actually a little off. And this is now ready for the customer. If you'd like to get in touch with us and order a kit if you want to do this at home, 781-335-8860. Or you can catch us on the web at then-now.com. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. Hit the little notification bell, and that'll do it. Thanks for watching, and be safe.